In the late 1970s, heavy metal was exploding. Motörhead was speeding up rock and roll, Iron Maiden was bringing galloping riffs, and Venom was adding darkness and chaos. But while these giants were shaping the sound, another band, one that few expected, was laying down the true foundations of thrash metal. This wasn't a band covered in spikes or obsessed with satanic imagery. Instead, they came from the punk underground, and their music was raw, aggressive, and fast beyond belief. They didn't set out to create a new genre. In fact, they only wanted to play louder and faster than anyone else around. Yet by accident, they gave birth to thrash, and their influence would echo in the riffs of Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax. But how could such an unlikely group far from the metal spotlight become the blueprint for a whole movement? That's where our story begins, on dirty stages, in sweaty clubs, with a band that never imagined they'd be hailed as the godfathers of thrash. Forget the legends you know. This is the band you don't expect. In the late 70s and early 80s, punk and heavy metal fans didn't get along. Punks thought metalheads were dinosaurs, clinging to long guitar solos and leather pants. Metal fans thought punks were sloppy and couldn't play their instruments, yet in that tension, something magical was happening. Bands were watching each other closely, stealing ideas, and sometimes mixing them. The band in question came from the punk side of the battlefield. Their music was lightning fast, filled with short, brutal songs that never slowed down. But unlike other punk groups, they didn't just shout with 3 chords. They had riffs. Sharp, aggressive riffs that sounded closer to metal than punk. When young metal kids heard it, they were blown away. The aggression was there, but so was the precision. This new hybrid sound hit like a hammer, pushing beyond the boundaries of both genres. It was punk speed with metal's heaviness, creating something no one had fully heard before. Thrash wasn't born in big arenas. It was born in grimy punk clubs. And this band was holding the torch, even if they didn't know it yet. So, who was this mysterious band? They weren't British giants like Iron Maiden or Judas Priest. They weren't theatrical like Venom. They were a group of misfits from California. Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, and others were huge in punk. But the band we're talking about is Discharge from the UK. Discharge started as a hardcore punk act, but they were different. Their songs were brutal blasts of speed, with riffs that cut sharper than most metal bands at the time. Their music wasn't about being polished. It was about power. Noise, not music, they proudly called it. Yet that noise caught the ears of young kids who would later form thrash bands. Metallica's James Hetfield openly admitted that Discharge influenced their speed and riffing style. Dave Mustaine of Megadeth took cues from their energy. Slayer also leaned into that chaotic fury. The irony? Discharge never set out to be a metal band. They wanted to destroy the rules of punk, not create a new genre. But their aggressive sound was the missing link. Without them, thrash might not have existed, or at least not in the way we know it today. Discharge didn't play long songs. Most were under 2 minutes. But what they packed into those minutes changed everything. Their drumming was relentless, sounding like machine gun fire. Their guitars were so distorted, it felt like the speakers were breaking. Their speed was unmatched. Even Motörhead seemed slow in comparison. For young metal musicians growing up, this was revolutionary. If punk bands could play this fast and this aggressive, why couldn't metal? Metallica, Anthrax, and Slayer didn't just admire this. They copied it. They took the blueprint of Discharge's speed and added technical solos and heavier riffs. That was the secret recipe. The D-beat drumming style, named after Discharge, became a cornerstone of thrash. What began as a chaotic punk experiment transformed into a weapon that metal bands wielded to destroy all boundaries. Discharge proved that speed wasn't just a gimmick. It could be the backbone of an entirely new sound. Another thing that separated Discharge from other bands was their message. While Iron Maiden sang about history and fantasy, and Venom sang about demons and hell, Discharge tackled real-world horrors. Their songs were about war, nuclear destruction, poverty, and human suffering. Titles like Protest and Survive and Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing weren't just catchy, they were warnings. This bleak worldview resonated with young metal fans. Thrash bands soon followed, writing about war, corruption, and social collapse. Metallica's Fight Fire with Fire, Slayer's War Ensemble, and Megadeth's Peace, Cells all carried echoes of Discharge's raw honesty. The difference was simple. Thrash gave those messages a more metallic edge. Discharge may not have known it, but they planted the lyrical seed that would grow into Thrash's obsession with politics, war, and destruction. Without them, thrash might have been just fast metal. Instead, it became music with a purpose. Discharge's influence didn't stay in the UK. Their records traveled across the Atlantic, landing in the hands of American kids hungry for something new. In the Bay Area of California, a young group of metal fans listened and immediately connected the dots. If punk could be this fast and this angry, why couldn't metal push itself even further? Those kids were Metallica, Slayer, and Exodus. They didn't just listen, they built upon it. They took Discharge's raw power, added longer solos, and layered in technical riffs. The result was the birth of the Bay Area thrash scene. But it wasn't only California. Across the U.S. from New York to Texas, young bands heard Discharge and were inspired. Hardcore punk kids and metalheads began attending the same shows, forming the crossover thrash scene. Discharge had crossed the ocean and lit a fire in an entirely new generation. By the mid-1980s, thrash was everywhere. Metallica released Kill 'Em All. Slayer dropped Show No Mercy. Megadeth and Anthrax followed suit. The world was witnessing a revolution. But behind the walls of noise, the fingerprints of Discharge remained. Even though these bands rarely admitted it early on, the punk spirit was alive in thrash. The speed, the aggression, the no-compromise attitude, it was pure Discharge. What's fascinating is how thrash evolved beyond its punk roots. Bands added complexity, technical solos, and cleaner production. Yet without the foundation of Discharge, that spark may have never ignited. Thrash became one of the most dominant metal styles of the 80s and influenced countless bands in the decades to come. But if you peel back the layers, the DNA leads straight back to a band that never wanted to be part of heavy metal at all. As thrash bands rose to fame, Discharge faded into the background. They never sold millions of records. They never played stadiums. Their raw punk style wasn't built for the mainstream. Yet their role as architects of thrash was undeniable. Musicians acknowledged it, even if fans didn't always realize. When asked about his influences, James Hetfield didn't hesitate to mention Discharge. Countless underground bands carried on their legacy, from hardcore punk to crust and grindcore. But while thrash legends became household names, Discharge remained a cult favorite. It's one of the strangest twists in music history. The band that gave thrash its speed and attitude is often forgotten when the story is told. Yet, history has a way of coming back around. Today, Discharge is celebrated as a crucial link between punk and metal. When you listen closely to thrash metal, you hear it. The DNA of Discharge. In the drumming, in the riffs, in the breakneck speed, their ghost is present. Thrash wasn't born from metal alone. It was a hybrid, a child of two worlds, punk's fury and metal's heaviness. Discharge unintentionally provided the missing piece. Without them, maybe thrash would have still existed, but would it have had the same bite, the same sense of urgency? Probably not. Thrash wasn't just about playing fast. It was about rebellion, and rebellion was something Discharge lived and breathed. They were outsiders who accidentally rewrote the rules, and those rules shaped one of the most powerful genres of all time. So, did Discharge create thrash metal? Maybe not on purpose, but their fingerprints are everywhere. Motörhead gave metal its speed. Iron Maiden gave it precision. Venom gave it darkness. But Discharge gave it the fury that pushed it over the edge. They weren't trying to impress metal fans. They weren't even trying to create a genre. They just wanted to play faster, dare, and angrier than anyone else. And in doing so, they changed music forever. Thrash metal may have been perfected by Metallica, Slayer, and Megadeth, but its spark came from a small punk band that few thought would matter. Sometimes the biggest revolutions don't come from the giants. They come from the outsiders, the rebels, and the unlikely bands who accidentally shape history. Discharge may never have wanted the crown, but in the story of thrash metal, their name will always be written in fire.